And apparently Katy Perry wrote Dark Horse. She was inspired by The Craft.
Oh, she did not.
Is she right?
PR
know
thing.
this stuff. How do you even know this stuff?
I am Phil Marriott. Welcome to Flick Flop, where four cinema lovers revisit a film from the past and decide if it's a must-see movie or a total dud. Sean Vickers, are you light as a feather or stiff as a board?
I'm always stiff as a board, Phil. Thank you.
We put a spell on her because she's ours. Gail Porter, we missed you last week. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm so sorry. I've been weirdly busy. I don't know what's going on. It's like I've died and I'm sort of paying homage to myself. I don't know what's going on.
I'm bringing some real magic to our show this week. It is the fabulous Bright Light. He's down there.
Ooh, hello. Thank you for having me.
Ooh.
I brought my most appropriate prop of the day. You can't see, but back there is my wild record collection, and this, of course, had to come out for the occasion.
It's a really fine soundtrack, is it not?
Fine is a misleading word, I think, Phil. Fine to me sounds acceptable. Whenever people say oh yeah, it was fine, it's oh, was it bad?
You know what fine means if you say fine? Effed up, insecure, neurotic, and exhausted. So if someone says to you, how are you feeling? Fine, like that.
So we are going back to 1996 today. Rod Thomas, Bright Light. I know that you're a big fan of 90s music and a lot of 90s movies. So I'm hoping for positive things here with our outcome, deciding on whether this film is a flick or flop. And it is The Craft, written and directed by Andrew Fleming, who I think directed one of the episodes of Dolly Parton's Netflix show, the series that came out last year.
Good for him.
Just thought I'd throw that one in there.
From a band of witches to the best witch, protecting us ever so generously, giving us vaccines and gorgeous songs, and just trying to be a good person for the rest of the world.
This is a massive favourite for me. Sidebar, I'm not in some kind of weird Savile Row setting. I'm just in some location. So ignore this mannequin next to me. Yeah, so it tells the story of Sarah. So Sarah is this adorable, lovely human being who moves into a new neighbourhood, and she moves to a new school, and she meets these three quite witchy human beings who listen to great music and have a fabulous time. And she gets involved really with being the fourth corner of this conversation, transactional witchy conversation, and the rest is history. That's how I would phrase it. She is one corner of a big conversation.
And it starts with a snake. What more do you want?
There are lots of snakes in the story.
I love snakes.
Snakes don't really tend to have a good run in films, do they? They're not usually the heroes or the final girl of the movie. Poor old snakes. Maybe snakes on the plane, they have a better chance, but otherwise I would say snakes not deemed to do well in the plot.
Everybody strap in!
I was chatting with Gail just a minute ago and we were talking about some of the quotes in this film because there are some amazing quotes. Also, a lot of really good insults. One of the insults in the classroom was somebody was called a snail trail. Best insult going. It's quite a polite insult, but a good one.
One of mine is oh, the girl on the right, she's a major slut. And I was like...
They don't hold back, do they? So character-wise, I think a couple of really convincing. I think Nancy is probably the most genuine and dark. Oh, we've lost Sean.
He's had too many Prosecco's in the afternoon, I think.
Initially, Robin Tunney wanted to play Neve Campbell's character, but she was convinced to play the other role. So maybe you're reading into the fact that Robin Tunney would have been much more invested in her original choice of character. He's back.
Hey, Sean's having a great day.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you.
We've moved everyone around.
I bind you, Sean, from being part of this conversation.
Thank you. I have been bound with the conversation. Sorry, my husband called and the whole thing went to shit, so I apologize.
Does he not know that you're part of Flip Flop now?
I would like to say to him, don't interrupt, but it would require the same device to say that. So anyway, ignore me. Sorry. I know I've really fucked everything up, so I apologize.
He's so excited about doing these things. So my next quote, right, everyone? I love you more than I love my mom. Creepy and weird.
I love Fairuza Balk. I think she's quite amazing as a character. I think as the villain, she's quite amazing. I mean, I love The Craft, and I love her as a character, and I think she's quite brilliant. I think Fairuza Balk captures something that you don't see very often in cinema.
I love Return to Oz, which is obviously like her first film, and just like such an amazing cinematic moment. And I love that she looks in The Craft like she's become this like demented version of that Dorothy character who has just like gone full evil and is like wreaking revenge on everybody that was bad to her in Return to Oz. It's just like she's like flipped the coin and she's just like, you will all die.
Special powers.
I love it. I used to fantasize in school about like being able to like, you know, the kid in school that would like not like bully you, but like relentlessly like tease you and whatever, and just being able to like flip all the tables and like make everything like batshit crazy and just scare the hell out of them.
Well, it's like Carrie, isn't it, in the 70s? It's the same kind of thing. It's like, I'd love to be able to do something like that, you know, especially if you're bullied. But I think there are a couple of scenes that do nod back to that, especially with the pencil that's drilling into the desk. It's almost like Carrie's ashtray on the desk that flies off.
Yeah.
But they could have completely used other tropes. They don't really use horror tropes in this. I think it's quite unique.
It, like, in my mind, this is one of the most loved 90s horror films or like witchy films. So in my mind, this is like cult classic. It would have like amazing reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's got like 57% or something, which is pathetic. And I really thought this was like Scream level of, you know, being revered, and I'm really shocked that it's not.
Should we talk about the soundtrack?
Oh, it's so good, Phil.
I got my gripes because a lot of these are cover versions, and I would have preferred to have heard originals. I know it's a little gripe, especially at the beginning when you hear Tomorrow Never Knows, and I just say it should have been the Missions track, because it's like pure goth. It's like, that's what this film is all about. I suppose the American market is a little bit different. It's a bit more rocky, isn't it, as opposed to goth. But Susie and the Banshees are in there, which I was very happy about.
And Portishead.
And Portishead.
Yeah. Crazily weird, like, British bands like Portishead and Elastica being included, which is very, you know, it's a cool inclusion, but it's very weird for like an American-made film with an all-American cast to then have like two random British indie bands amongst all of the other, you know, very American cover versions of tracks and very like a US sound.
It made me think that they were trying to make out that, you know, if you're going to be like really witchy and a little bit weird, then you're going to have to listen to British music.
We're the centre of witchy music central.
Dressing like witches, but we're going to listen to British music, so that makes us totally mental.
Well, a lot of like villains were English, weren't they, in like a lot of horror movies traditionally? Like you'd have like the evil like English school teacher, school mistress, or the woman that ran like the boarding house. It'd always be this very severe like English woman, I find.
I did have that sleepy moment. Like, remember, Sean, when you were watching Police Academy, when you get to that moment, you just think, I don't do this anymore. I love you, Phil, but my God, seriously?
Do you think this film had an 80s feel? Because it reminded me a little bit of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. You know, a lot of the scenes where you could see shadows and it was quite gritty. Yeah, it just reminded me of something from the mid to late 80s as opposed to the mid to late 90s.
The whole team making it obviously were a big fan of 80s horror cinema, in the way that I think like Wes Craven was also doing the Scream, and he was aware of like tropes in the 80s, whether he's like playing with them or playing against them. I think the team around The Craft clearly loved that like dark world that they created in Nightmare on Elm Street. It's less funny than that, but there are moments of like bitchiness that kind of allude to that sense of humor and tongue-in-cheek ness that a lot of 80s horror movies had.
And apparently Katy Perry wrote Dark Horse. She was inspired by The Craft.
Oh, she did not.
Was she right?
Know this stuff. How do you even know this stuff? They sort of dealt with a bit of self-harming, and then she was like, "Oh, I slit my wrist," and they were like, "Oh, but at least you did it the right way." I was like, "You can't say that in a film." Oh my God! Oh God! Please don't say these things. That's a terrible thing to say. It's like all teenagers that are going to watch The Craft, like, we're going to be witches and we know exactly how to kill ourselves. No, it was quite disturbing.
Yeah, I think there are some disturbing moments. Yeah, there's some really iconic moments that just made my flesh crawl a little bit. I mean, the walking on the water when she's just drifting, and also the animals that are washed up on the shore. It had a really weird atmosphere to it. But I thought that was quite effective. The effects I thought were pretty slick as well.
They were, yeah.
But I thought, remember, what was the magician that had his eye on David Blaine? That was a bit like that. I was watching it and she was like walking on water. I was like, oh, you know what? David Blaine just nicked that off you, mate.
I mean, Phil, I love you, but the moment where she decided that she was going to dye her hair blonde, that moment where she goes and her hair becomes blonde, I was thinking, that's not the slickest CGI I've seen in town. And also, most gays in lockdown would wish that they could just turn their hair blonde during that moment, you know? Loads of gays turn their hair blonde. So I was a bit like, if only you could just, you know, do that.
Yeah, we'll just discuss here now, shall we? Is that what's happening?
Well, actually, on that tip, Robin Tunney wore a wig during the whole film because she'd shaved her head for Empire Records, and so all of her hair in that film was a wig.
Oh,
What?
It would have been interesting to have a wig reveal moment like a la like The Witches, you know,
Yeah.
with Angelica Houston. I'm surprised that they didn't play on that actually with her if she was shaved headed at the time.
are we going to call this a horror?
This is not a horror. In my category, I mean, you know that I hate horror. I can't even deal with it. This for me is, I don't know, it's kind of like post-Buffy realness. Like, I love it. I mean, I think it's amazing. I mean, this film for me is so powerful. I watched it last night with my husband and I was like, it's still powerful. It's still got something that I absolutely love about it. So, yeah, it's not horror. I mean, Phil, you try and make me watch some right old horror nonsense. This isn't it, if I'm really honest.
It's funny you should say that because Jeremy, my other half, did actually call this movie nonsense. He actually used the same word.
Nonsense. I mean, that'd be unfair. I mean, it's brilliant, but like, it's not horror. It's definitely not horror.
Could you do us a favour and like every week when we're doing this, could you like go for wine because it's really funny?
Gail, that's so easy. That's the easiest request ever.
Oh my god, I'm loving it. You're so funny.
Yeah, I'm really living for it as well, honestly, Sean. It's fantastic.
So do you think we're ready to decide if it's a flick or a flop?
2 thumbs up, 2 witches thumbs up, twirling. I think this film's great. I really think that, like, you know, it did like a film in a way that lots of people weren't doing at the time.
He's gone again.
Oh, he's gone.
Of course it's done.
He's just
He's muted
back
himself.
to wine.
What is he doing? Oh, hang on. He's back. Oh, there we go.
I'm not doing anything. I'm seriously not.
Is that the witches?
Oh my god. Is his phone like in the glass of wine?
I'm with you. I think maybe half a thumbs up.
Yeah.
It was kind of weird and like it was a little bit racist. There was a few comments that were quite racist and bullies. I don't really do bullies, but then you know the witchy stuff I quite like.
That racism comment was really shocking. But I'm just wondering if they put that in there just to kind of prove that girl was, she needed, you know, her comeuppance.
I don't like
Yeah,
the racist word.
that was
They
really
said
shocking.
that.
I watched some horror documentary anyway the other day where they interviewed her and she was saying she was like not super thrilled that they put the racist element in. I think they wanted to center her trauma in racism because initially the character wasn't written as a black character and then they cast her and they rewrote elements of it to make it like a black storyline. So I think she was herself a bit disappointed with the inclusion of that like specific racism. I do think like
Yeah, I didn't like that at all. I was a bit
Yeah.
shocked and thought, do you know what? I don't think there's any need for that.
yeah, you
I
can
don't
see
know
the
what they were trying
intention,
to
but
do.
it's just not necessary, you know.
Yeah, because
It was.
we've reviewed movies from like the 70s and the 80s, and you know, I mean, we've reviewed Police Academy just recently, and that's full of really problematic stuff. But you know, 1996, like maybe they should have.
Yeah,
don't
that's
know.
what I was a bit shocked about. I thought 1996, they should not be saying what I didn't get the point. I think if you're going to make a point about, you know, racism and bullying and that was not the quote that you'd put in. I was pretty upset about that one.
Bit of a shocker. So yeah, I mean, for me, I really enjoyed it, and I found it really unique, because I think so many of these types of movies do kind of steal ideas from other films of that genre, and I think it it's hard to classify. You can't really necessarily call it a horror or a teen movie. I suppose it is a teen movie, but yeah, I thought it broke the mold a little bit.
Yeah, it's a flawed sort of like, not masterpiece, but it's a flawed film which has like some really great elements, like Fairuza Balk's performance, and like some of the casting is great whether they're in the right roles or not. It's definitely not a perfect script. It's not a perfect execution, but like there are elements in it which like suggests that like the team around it are very strong, but they maybe didn't get it right, I think. So
and now I just want loads of butterflies to come down.
in my mind, I class it with the film The Faculty. I don't know if you remember that film.
Oh yeah,
which I think is actually amazing, and I think that does exactly what it set out to do, whereas this one kind of doesn't quite do that. And they both play around with like hybrid genres and tropes, but like with The Faculty, you could definitely identify what its aims and goals and successes are. And this one, it's a little bit less clear. Like Gail was saying, like you don't know what genre it's in, which is cool, but also like very problematic when you're trying to find the audience for a movie, and probably why it's got such dispersed reviews online and why it's a cult classic, but it's also not really one that people talk about a lot, you know?
Yeah, I don't think it's a flop. I'm going to give it a flick. I don't know about Sean. I'm guessing that he would give it a flick. That sounds so wrong, doesn't it?
He's just gone to Soho. He's dancing his pants off. He's having
he's having a great time. Really great time.
I don't care about doing this anymore. I don't care. I've been drinking wine. It's fine.
Do that.
Absolutely amazing.
Well, hopefully Sean will be back next week. He will return. Rod, brilliant to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
What have you got coming up?
You,
I know, because it's Pride Month, and of course lots of things happening. I love the fact that you're speaking out about these brands that all of a sudden are backing LGBT. The LGBT community when they're not actually putting any money into.
What happens every year like clockwork? They've got like their rainbow flags and their LGBTQ sandwiches, and they're like gay screwdrivers, and they're like, I don't know, like faggy books and all these kind of things. Like every conceivable brand is like, oh, you need like a stepladder, get on you like rainbow stepladder. It will make you feel fabulous when you change the lights. And you're like, oh, come on, people. And it's obviously better to have visibility, but like if that money from those sales is not going into queer pockets, then there's really no point to it also. My thing is, like, if you want to support the queer community during Pride Month, you can maybe look up queer-owned businesses or independents that are doing something, which most of us do, I think, but not everybody does. Like, because you see the Pride logo or the branding, and you just assume that you're doing something good by buying that from the store, which isn't always the case.
Absolutely,
but
well said.
Lovely to be represented.
Yeah, definitely.
Well said. Exactly. Well said.
So people can check your music out if they haven't bought it already. You are online. Where can people find you? All over social media and your website? Social
media, yep. It's all at Brightlight X2. If you type in Spotify, it's Brightlight. And for those that don't know, somehow 10 years into this very youthful career of mine, the name comes from Gremlins, Brightlight. So I'm a huge film fan. So thank you for having me on a film podcast.
It's a pleasure to have you on.
So I'm doing that for you.
Such a great movie, and the second one as well. Gail, you've got so much stuff, but a lot of it, presumably, you can't talk about yet.
Yeah, there's loads going on, which is great fun and kind of weird. But do you know what? You were so coming with me on one of my locations.
Can't wait. Get very excited.
But I'm very excited, and it's some people do lots of jobs that sometimes you're not that happy about, and so I love doing this, and I've written something, and someone took up the idea, and so basically I'm going to go and do something that I'm going to be really happy doing.
Applause. Yes. Yes.
Excited.
Good to see you both. Thank you everybody for watching. See you next time. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video as well. See you soon. Bye everyone.
I've really fucked everything up, so I apologise.